Welcome to this presentation about more than human design for coastal justice. To discuss this topic, we shall focus on one case study, the mangrove communities in Jakarta Bay, Indonesia. My name is Girvan Tenggono, and I am presenting this work on behalf of the research team from the University of Melbourne. We also represent Deep Design Lab, a research and creative laboratory that focuses on more than human, interspecies, and ecocentric form of design. The aim of this research is to frame non-human beings as designer and to consider benefits of this approach. To do this, we consider whether mangrove communities, such as the one you can see in this image, can lead more than human design projects. To discuss this, let me introduce our case. As already mentioned, we focus on Indonesia and its mangroves that are, as is also common in many other places, in a severe decline. To mitigate Jakarta's troubles with water, that includes pollution, sea level rise, floods, and storms that require constant repairs, the Indonesian government proposed to build a seawall and 17 artificial islands. This project will cost some 40 billion American dollars and construct a 32-kilometer island with the shape of the mythical bird Garuda. Many do not believe that this is a good solution, because it ignores the lives and the need of local communities, human and non-human. We argue that this approach worsens conflict between human and non-human inhabitants without achieving the desired outcome. This problem is global. Humans replace living environments with grey infrastructure, causing significant damage and acquiring no long-term success. Research shows that green infrastructure is cheaper and can provide the same flood protections. It can add further benefits, including biodiversity, erosion protection, and preservation of local cultures. However, the anthropocentric focus on such solutions often exclude non-charismatic forms of life. In pursuing economic goals, they can also harm traditional human communities. We suggest that a better approach should center multi-species communities such as those supported by Jakarta's mangroves. To do this, we use design experiments to demonstrate alternative futures that combine traditional knowledge, scientific evidence, and engineering with non-human creativity and expertise. In this commitment, we move beyond anthropocentric and paternalistic approaches, such as nature-based solution or ecosystem services, because we do not agree that human needs are more important or that humans knows best. All human knowledge has limitations, but some groups have a much better track record than others. In Jakarta, frequently marginalized coastal residents retain rich botanical and ecological knowledge, adat, which can enable and support non-human leadership. Adat promotes the principle of kepenjagaan, or stewardship, among humans who consider themselves an integral part of the bay and engage in persistent hands-on care for the sea and mangroves. Prior to colonization, Jakarta's bay was a rich and biodiverse ecosystem. As you can see on this slide, in 1905, the mangrove forest extended 3 km inland and acted as a keystone habitat. Surviving toponyms confirm this condition. For example, Muara Karang, the name of an urban area at the water's edge, means reef estuary. Mangrove used to protect coral reef from the sediment that moved down the shore slopes and the shoreline from the wind and water erosion. Today, most human residents of Jakarta live separately from non-human beings. The bay ecosystem lost many of its non-human communities, and the mangroves are diminishing. Humans see the remaining forests as economic opportunities and not residents, kin, or stakeholders. Mid to high-income residents live in gated communities which rely on gutters and canals, segregated from mangroves but also from the kampong or village, traditional communities whom they see as poor and undesirable. Planned seawalls and land reclamation projects further damages and exclude the mangroves and the human coastal residents. As indicated on this slide, this segregation is not sustainable because mangrove, traditional communities, and other urban residents all face an unavoidable pressure from the rising water levels and increasingly damaging floods. This situation has rendered mangroves as victims. Development project pushes the mangrove towards the water, while the rising sea, land subsidence, the seawall, and land reclamation presses in the opposite direction. Predicted outcomes are grim, we suggest. However, that framing mangroves as victim can be unhelpful because this framing creates the impression that mangroves are weak or inadequate, thus shifting the blame away from humans and their oppressive choices. Instead, we emphasize that mangroves are competent designers, engineers, and carers with a long and excellent track record that can lead projects in urban design and help to restore the damaged regions. To illustrate, this diagram shows possible relationships that center on mangroves. This approach aims to support dynamic relationship between multiple members of the eco-social communities of the bay. Let us discuss the landscape level consequences for typical zones. Zone 1 focuses on streets. It exhumes canals and allows mangroves to penetrate urban typologies. Zone 2 includes the coastline, with opportunities for rich non-human communities, as well as for ecotourism, education, and other human practices supported by mangroves. Zone 3 introduces a collaborative method for bay reclamation that combines sediment accreted by the river with waste from traditional seashell farms that you see on this image, and accretion by mangrove communities to restore the bay's ecological function. Breakwater structures shown in Zone 4 will still be necessary to protect from king floods. However, soft and living infrastructure provides multiple benefits for multi-species cohabitation. Here is an example of opportunities provided by the mangrove-led approach within the existing city structure. In places, the urban pattern still retains the water management features introduced by the Dutch. Today, they are often lifeless, as you can see in this photograph, or on this section that shows the current condition of a typical street that we mark with a red rectangle on the map at the bottom left. This includes underground canals, non-permeable paving, car-centric road, and hostility to human pedestrian traffic. Few organisms and no mangroves can survive in such conditions. This image jumps ahead to 2040. Led by the mangrove capabilities, we show exhumed canals, developing plants, and a safer environment for humans. The last in the sequence, the state in 2080, shows maturing mangroves, a greater diversity of species, and an expanded walkway. With human support, this ecosystem is stable and functioning. The next sequence follows a similar logic by following the breakwater structures along the water edge. The boardwalk acts as a breakwater for the protection for mangrove colonies and a nursery for fishes. Mangroves reclaim sediment, supporting the boardwalk, reef, sand dunes, and seagrass meadows. Openings allow access into and out of the bay, leading to an established ecosystem in 2080. Returning to the loop is an example of a design intervention. Let us highlight some of its function. As you can see, by looking at the stops marked on this image, the loop creates habitat for non-human beings and gives humans an opportunity to learn about their lives through informal research and educational activities. Let us now have a look at a couple of scenes at the end of this century. The proposed loop engages human and other species, such as ibises and kingfishers, as well as many human activities, including artisanal fishing. Wildlife returns to the habitat, indigenous culture thrives, and soft habitat structures foster resilient, more than human communities. This image shows elements of artificial habitat structures that have proven successful in recent projects that aims to construct living shoreline. They include cavities for fish, crustaceans, mollusks, and microorganisms, creating a complex structure that typical gray infrastructure eliminates. To conclude, our study confirms that mangroves can express their capability in the cities, and through this expression, lead more than human design imagination. To make this outcome more likely, the project promotes the local wisdom that support mangroves as self-standing living beings as well as for future human generations. Our design example offers potential scenarios that prioritizes care, solidarity, and communal imagination. We hope that this approach can inspire efforts for better coexistence of humans and mangroves in a range of urban environments. If you'd like to see our other work, you can find it at this address. Thank you for listening.